Hi guys, Dr. Nathan Thompson here, author of the book Transformation 28 and creator of the T28 Challenge, also Wellness Way affiliate here in Yorkville, Illinois. And welcome to Weight Loss, How to Destroy the Roadblocks. And basically the purpose of today is to really help you identify the biggest roadblocks that you may be experiencing when it comes to this whole field of weight loss. But let me ask you guys a question. How many of you have just about had it when it comes to weight loss? And how many of you have gotten to the point where weight loss is a lot more complex than just this whole calories in, calories out type plan? And today I want to be really open, really honest with you. I want you to be honest with yourself. And in fact, one of the biggest roadblocks to health is really just a lot of people have the inability to be open and honest with themselves and also with others. So first step is let's be open, let's be honest, and raise your hand if you have had the super laser lipo in order to try to lose weight or lose fat. Raise your hand if you've actually have done the super detox wraps in which they wrap you up, hopefully that you're shrinking your fat cells. How many of you have done the super secret, goji berry or whatever it might be that just was discovered in the Inca Mountains? Or how about if you've done some kind of cleanse or some kind of detox in order to clean out your liver or to clean out your colon or something like that? Or you may have actually have done, some form of ketogenic plan or ketosis, or maybe you've actually have gotten to the point where maybe you've done some kind of 3-day or some kind of 5-day water fast. And the reason why you did it was because your friend did it and your friend swears by it and your friend had incredible results, which means that you're going to have incredible results too. But here's the problem, is that you did it and it didn't work. And the reason why is because everyone is different, everyone is unique based on their physiology and based off of their lab testing. Now, don't get me wrong, there's actually something inherently probably good about all of these different things. But listen, everyone is unique and everyone is like a snowflake, is no two people are going to be alike. Now, full disclosure is that I did actually write a book and I did actually write a kind of protocol. And the reason why I did it is because it's really just a start somewhere approach that really everyone could benefit from, regardless of any kind of testing or anything like that. But I also realized that what I did was not a lifestyle, but rather an intervention in order to help stabilize some things so that you can then go back to having a healthy lifestyle. Now, you may be watching this video and your first question might be is, Dr. Nate, what is the protocol? What's your protocol? And people ask me this all the time. Is they say, what's your protocol for this? What's your protocol for that? What's your protocol to do this? As if there is a fixed protocol for every single thing. Many times you may actually go to a diet coach, and the diet coach actually writes you a protocol, which means they weigh you, they might measure you, they might tell you that you need to eat 500 calories less, per day, and then you need to add this many calories of exercise. And the thing is you got to understand is the body is way more dynamic than that. And let me give you an example. How many of you knew that your thyroid output, which is really controlling your overall metabolism, your thyroid output actually changes day to day? It actually changes according to a woman's menstrual cycle. It actually changes with the temperature outside, and it actually changes in fluctuation in response to other hormones as well. So how can someone tell you that all you need to do is just restrict a certain number of calories and you're actually going to lose weight? So the reality is that there really is no protocol. Now, here's where it comes to weight loss. This is what people want. People want an easy amount or a large amount of weight loss and to do it effortlessly and have you keep that weight loss goal for the rest of your life. Here's actually, if you look at it, something that's going to be a little bit more realistic. So you lose weight and it's steady over time, but here's what actually happens is that you lose a little bit of weight, you gain a little bit of weight. One day you get on the scale, you gain 5 pounds, then you lost 7, you gain it. And so I want you to know this is what actually happens. And I want you to know that the struggle is absolutely real. But here's the thing, if you focus on the end only, you forget that there are ups and downs. And so, you see yourself going in the wrong direction and then it's over. Now, just understand this is when it comes to weight loss, the best part is actually the struggle. It's knowing that every day you own every single decision, knowing every day you're going to win the battle. You forgive the mistakes that you made in the past. You let it go and you just continue to move on. The biggest thing when it comes to it is just enjoying the journey of building healthy habits. Now, for those of you who are still listening right now and you want to lose 10 pounds quickly, I'm going to show you what you need to do, and you can shut this off right afterwards, okay? So here's how you lose 10 pounds quickly. In fact, I'm going to say you lose way more than 10 pounds. So number one is you get on the scale. Number two, get in a rocket ship, go to the moon, make sure that you take your scale, and then get out your scale, put on your astronaut suit, and then get on the scale on the moon, because the moon has about 1/6 of the gravitational pull than the Earth does. And there you go, you weigh only 22 pounds on the moon, and you've lost 128 pounds. So listen, I want to tell you this, is that weight is a measure of gravitational pull. It doesn't take into account muscle mass. It doesn't take into account what your bone density is. It doesn't take into account water weight or water retention. And you might be saying, Dr. Nate, isn't that a little bit dramatic? And yes, it is. But so is basing your day on the fact that you gained 5 pounds from the night before of water weight, thinking that it's actually fat. So can we just agree that the number on the scale is actually a really stupid number? And can we also agree to stop basing our day, our happiness, and our self-esteem by what a number on the scale actually looks like? And I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to speak to the ladies especially, is that no man has ever said this. They've never said, hey girl, I was thinking about asking you out, but I heard you weighed X amount of pounds, so I guess I'm not going to. No man has ever said this. And men, from speaking for men and ladies, we don't care about the scale. We don't have a set weight that makes us think you're beautiful or not. So what I want you to do instead is I want you to do this. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine your ideal body. So close your eyes and I want you to imagine your ideal body. Just think about what that would actually look like. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Now that you've pictured what your ideal body is, how much does that version of yourself being ideal, how much do you weigh? And I'm going to tell you something, you have no idea how much you're supposed to weigh. Now, here's the thing. If you look at these two pictures, which one of these women weigh 150 pounds? And here's the answer. They both do. Both of them are 5'4", and both of them weigh 150 pounds. And here's the thing. According to body mass index, which is measuring your height versus your weight, both of them are considered unhealthy and both of them are considered overweight. I want you to let that sink in just for a second. So one of the biggest enemies is the scale, and the scale has caused more stress about weight than Twinkies, than about fitting into your wedding dress, and your mother-in-law combined. So one of the first things is you got to stop stressing about your gravitational pull on the earth, otherwise known as your weight. Now here's the thing too, men typically take it the other way. So we go to the other extreme. We got men, we fall on this opposite end of the spectrum because we say, I never step on the scale because the scale doesn't measure sexy. So here you have men who don't care about the scale, who don't care about their health. And what happens is that you see many men, as they start getting into their 30s, into their 40s, where actually they start to develop what's known as the dad bod. Now the dad bod is when men typically grow breasts, start to put a lot of weight on, they see their testosterone plummet. And the thing is that the dad bod is actually very sick as well. So just because you don't let body image stress you out, it doesn't mean that you won't get sick. So Diets. What about diets? Because people ask me all the time about, Dr. Nate, what's the best diet that's out there? And I'm going to tell you, there's something inherently good about almost every single diet, but it doesn't mean that you should necessarily do it. So I always say that diets suck. So what about keto? Keto, we always say, yay, bacon. I get to eat as much protein, as much fat as I want, and I want to restrict my carbs. So here's the thing. There's something inherently good with keto, and it doesn't mean that everyone should be doing it. One of the biggest roadblocks why someone should never, ever, ever, ever do keto is they're having a hard time breaking down proteins, or they're having problems with their liver, or they're having problems with their gallbladder. And I'm going to go over that too, why women struggle with weight loss when they don't have their gallbladder. Now, what about paleo? So paleo is actually eating how your ancestors ate. And so it's restricting grains, it's restricting processed grains, and it's restricting corn. It's restricting a lot of things that you would get from the farm. There's a lot of benefit from doing paleo. Problem is that people can take it to a point where they actually start to consume a lot of unhealthy natural sweeteners, and the whole intention of paleo was to eat like your ancestors. But a lot of people will take paleo and make all of these elaborate desserts and add a bunch of sweeteners in it that doesn't involve sugar. What about zone? So a lot of people can benefit from zone. In fact, sometimes it's a good starting point for people whose lifestyle has gotten really out of hand. So zone is actually 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat. But also the quality of your food is what matters more than the distribution of your calories. So a lot of times people say, well, I can eat whatever I want as long as it fits within that 40, 30, 30. So they end up eating a lot of food that can become a major roadblock to weight loss. And then you have the whole 30. So the whole 30 is actually, having whole foods, unprocessed foods. And the idea of whole 30 is absolutely fantastic. But one of the biggest problems that I've seen in practice is that a lot of people who do whole 30 do whole 30 and they don't do whole 365, meaning they can't wait to get done with it and go back to their former lifestyle after day 30. So one of the biggest things or biggest problems or roadblocks with the whole 30 is really compliance. It's following through long term. And then you got the Atkins diet. And the Atkins diet is a very high protein, high fat type diet, very low carbohydrate. And one of the biggest problems too is, again, for women, it can be their liver, their inability for some people to break down proteins. But the other thing too is that it doesn't differentiate between healthy sources of fats and healthy sources of proteins. Then you got the Mediterranean diet, which is popular with a lot of women because the Mediterranean diet is all about wine. And so a lot of women will say, hey, I tend to drink wine because wine is healthy for you. Now, let me be very clear. The sugar and the alcohol in wine is not healthy for you. But the resveratrol actually is. So one of the biggest problems is that you can develop a lot of problems by drinking a lot of wine, eating a lot of bread. But one of the things that's actually positive about the Mediterranean diet is because people from Italy or Italy and South France along the Mediterranean, the reason why they have a healthy longevity is actually because they tend to combine their fats with their sugars, which actually slows the absorption of the sugars and slows what's known as an insulin response. And then you got Jenny Craig, you got Weight Watchers, you got things like that, which they are all about weight loss, all about restricting your food portions. So it's all about restriction, not necessarily eating healthy foods. And you weigh in every week, and it's a major plus when you lost 0.23421 pounds the last week. But here's the question, here's one of the biggest positives with Jenny Craig and with Weight Watchers, is this. Out of all of these different nutrition plans, if you would go back after a year and see the total weight loss, out of all of these different diet plans I actually go over, the one where people actually lost the most weight is actually Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, and the number one reason why is because of accountability. So I want you to think about that, is accountability is 100% huge with you staying on track and losing weight. But the problem is even if you did lose weight, here's what's more important, is that if you are losing weight, you want to become healthier in the process. So how do you know if you're getting healthier in the process? By doing the proper testing. Now, think about this. Is the thing about someone with cancer, people with cancer, advanced stages of cancer, they lose weight very rapidly, but they still die. And so think of this is that weight loss does not equate to health. But when you start to do healthy habits, when they lead to weight loss, will actually lead to health. So just understand this. You might have felt this way when it comes to trying to fit into the latest fad diet. And the thing is that everyone is unique. And I know that a lot of you feel like this cat trying to fit into this tiny box is that it doesn't work for everybody. So many people are saying, you need to do this diet because it worked for me, but yet those two people have very different roadblocks when it comes to weight loss. So here's what the goals are for today. The first goal is this. I want you to think differently about weight loss. Hopefully you've already started doing that. Number two, I want you to be able to identify your roadblocks and be able to apply the tools and know the type of tests that you need. And finally, the third thing is for you to take action, because nothing is ever going to happen unless you take action. And at the end, make sure you watch it all the way to the end. I'm going to actually show you how you can get started and how you can start to take action. Now listen, I want you to know something. The struggles that you have had are the struggles that I have had as well. And so this is actually me at 18 years of age. Now listen, when I was 18 years of age, I looked skinny, but I was not healthy. So I had chronic joint pain, I had irritable bowel syndrome, I had frequent ear infections, I had acne, I took 4 to 6 Advil every single day because my joints hurt so badly. So I had an immune system that was wrecked, a digestive system that was wrecked, and I suffered from a lot of chronic inflammation. Now, even though I was skinny, I was not healthy, and the reason why I looked like this was because I played sports. So basically, I could hide any kind of weight gain by burning it off playing sports, because my diet was an absolute disaster. It was Burger King, it was McDonald's, it was Hardee's at least one time per day. And in fact, many times after basketball practice, I would drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew or Dr. Pepper on the way home. So my diet was absolutely horrendous, and that was causing already at that point a lot of health issues. But on the outside, I looked good because I was exercising every single day. Well, fast forward 30 years, when you go into full-time practice, you get married, you're working 70 hours a week, and you got kids on the way, and the same thing that happened to a lot of people happened to me, where it was I was saying, I'll start the workout tomorrow, I'll start the healthy nutrition tomorrow, I'll start this, this, and this, I'll do it tomorrow because right now I'm way too busy. So what happened is, by the time that I was 18 years of age until the time that I was 30, is I had gained about 65 to 70 pounds. And my health was a disaster. My pain levels, my bowels, all those things, I still have these issues with. And I finally decided that I was going to make it a priority. And I was going to spend the time to start doing the right things and build the right healthy habits to get my health back. And this is me in a 10-year difference. So this is me at 40 years of age. Now here's what's interesting, is that physically you see that there is a really big change, but the difference on my gravitational pull to the scale was actually between the left and right picture was only a 10-pound weight loss. So I want you to understand that really weight loss is not the goal. It is building healthy habits and working on changing your body composition. Now, speaking of body composition, if you actually look at what the body is actually composed of, is that for the average American, it's 45% protein, it's 35% fat, minerals, things like potassium, magnesium, sodium, iron, things like that make up about 12% of your structure, body composition. 3% vitamins A, D, E, K, vitamins A, vitamins B, things like that make up 3%. But here's what's interesting. only 5% of your body is composed of carbohydrates or sugars. So this might be blood sugar, this might be stored sugar within the liver and in the muscles, but then also some of your joints and bone constituents and things like that also are are made up of sugars as well. So really only 5% of your body is actually comprised of sugar. Now here's what's interesting. If you look at brain composition is about 35% protein. It is over 60% fat, and it's only 4% sugars. So I want you to think about this just for a second. That 60% of your brain that makes up you is actually composed of fat. Let that sink in. So let me ask you a question, do you think then that a quote unquote low fat diet is good for you or bad for you? Because this is what the current USDA recommendations are, right? So now you look at the difference between brain composition and the recommendations as far as how much sugars and proteins and fats you should be getting, is that it's actually 60% fats, 60% carbs, 20% fat, and 20% protein. So if you do the 5 to 7 servings of grains, if you do the 3 to 5 servings of fruits, the 3 to 5 servings of vegetables every single day, and then you avoid and only have lean proteins and avoid fats as much as possible, this is what you would be getting. And I want you to think about something, is that most people eat a diet that has too much or excessive carbohydrates or too much sugars. But when you think of the United States, one of the fastest growing injuries, it's not an illness because it's reversible, is type 2 diabetes. So when you look at 51% of our country that's taking a medication for a chronic illness, including kids, 51%, the thing is I want you to realize is that you were set up to fail. So that if you follow politicians and big government's advice on how you should eat, then you are set up to fail and you are set up to get sick. I know a lot of people right now, they're probably thinking, then why? Why would they recommend that? Well, there's only two reasons why. The first reason is that they're incredibly stupid, which I don't believe they are. Or number two is that there's a vested interest in making those recommendations. Because who passes these recommendations? It's government. And I want you to think about this for a second. Who pays the government their salary? We do. And we don't pay them a great salary. It's a modest salary. But how do government officials and politicians, how do they get rich on an okay salary? They get rich because of the lobbies. So maybe there's a vested interest in the corn lobby. Maybe there's a vested interest in the sugar industry to make those recommendations in order to boost up those actual businesses. So you have to be very aware of doing that, of what they're doing. But you also have to be aware that you don't have to be set up to fail, is that you can make a choice and you can make a difference. So let's go over the roadblocks to weight loss. Notice I'm not going to say anything about calories in, calories out, because here's the thing. Clinically, when we start to identify these roadblocks, I've never ever have had to tell people about how many calories they should be consuming, because those things will work their way out if you start to do these 4 things, which means hormones are going to start to regulate, hunger starts to regulate the way that they're supposed to, and that your body then innately already knows exactly how much food you should be consuming. So here's your first roadblock, and it's insulin. So insulin is a hormone that I'm going to talk about in a second that helps to put increased blood sugar either into cells or to use as fat storage. And there's 2 things that are really going to raise insulin, this hormone inside the body. It's going to be too much available sugar, and number 2, it's going to be too much stress. Now, I want you to think of it, who stresses out more, men or women? Actually, women do, but just so you know, ladies, is that men are probably the reason why you stress out so much. So let me show you why this is a major roadblock. And this is a major roadblock that it's almost universal, okay? So number 1, let's talk about insulin and sugar. So here's what happens. Number 1, you eat carbs that are rapidly digested and absorbed. Now, the most readily available, the most readily processed, and the most readily absorbed carbohydrates are actually going to be things like table sugar, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, even some fruit as well can be rapidly digested and rapidly absorbed. So then you eat those in the high amounts. And what happens is that gets digested and it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and your blood sugar starts to go way up. And then what has to happen is your pancreas releases a hormone that's known as insulin, and it releases it into the blood. Now what happens as that insulin circulates, it then attaches to muscle cells, organ cells, and that insulin helps to put those sugars into the cells to be used for energy. Now here's what happens. When you have a tremendous spike in blood sugar, really the body can only handle a little under a teaspoon at a time, which means if you have more than a teaspoon of sugar that's immediately and readily available, then if it's not used as energy, then insulin will put it into fat storage. Now here's the problem. Long term, when you keep doing this and you keep driving insulin up, anytime that you have this chronic exposure to a hormone, to a drug, or to a chemical, is that you're going to have a desensitization to it. Kind of like nicotine and smoking. No one starts off by smoking 3 packs a day. Starts off with 1 cigarette, but in 15 years it might be to 1 to 2 packs. So long term, these cells cannot hear this insulin response, which means that in order to have the same response, you keep having to release more and more and more insulin in order to get the same response. And this is known as insulin resistance, otherwise known as pre-diabetes, which about half of our country, if you took 100 people, random people, 50% of them, including kids, would have some level of insulin resistance. What about insulin and stress? See, the thing is that you can actually become pre-diabetic or even type 2 diabetic based on actually having too much mental stress. So here's what happens. You may have mental stress, or you may have, and this stress might be real or it might be perceived. Real stress is when a bear is chasing you. Perceived stress is when you're worried about work, or you're worried about where you're going to eat your next meal, or you're worried about your paycheck, or you're worried about your family. That's called perceived stress. Here's the thing. Your body physiologically makes no distinction. So let's say that a bear is actually chasing you. You're going to have a stress response. And what happens is there's 2 hormones that get released by these tiny little glands above your kidneys. They're called your adrenal glands. And adrenal glands immediately are going to release what's known as adrenaline. You've felt that before. You get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, and then your heart rate starts to rapidly breathe, your eyes dilate, your heart rate starts to go elevate. You start, getting ready to be able to run away from the bear. After about 20 minutes or so, you're going to release another hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is actually the blood sugar regulating hormone. Cortisol is a great hormone when you are releasing the proper amounts, but when you have chronic stress, you're going to be releasing way too much of it. So what happens is this cortisol gets released by the adrenal glands. It makes its way to the liver. The liver actually secretes a hormone called glucagon that then starts to mobilize your stored sugars. That's called glycogen. That's in your liver and it's in your muscles. So then once it starts to mobilize that and turn it into glucose, your blood sugar goes up, and then insulin has to be released to put it into your cells to use as energy so that you can run away from the bear. Now here's the problem. I'm going to guarantee that all of you don't have a bear chasing you, but you do have a lot of mental stress. And so what happens is you have that mental stress, the body tries to mobilize all this energy, but you never use it. So then what has to happen is that it's got to go back into storage again. So you're constantly bombarding the whole entire body with insulin and more insulin and more insulin. and then you can actually develop insulin resistance because the cells can't hear insulin just based off of having a lot of chronic stress. So number one, you're consuming too much sugar that's too readily available, and number two, you're too stressed out. So people who have insulin resistance are going to have a lot of fatigue. They're going to have constant hunger because they have a hard time regulating their blood sugar. They have an inability to lose weight. They have constant cravings for sugar. They experience fatigue after meals. I mean, how many kids eat lunch and then need to go to take a nap afterwards? They might have migrating aches and pains. They'll have upper abdominal obesity. And then what leads to this, what leads to after insulin resistance, is actually going to be a lot of hormone issues. In fact, one of the biggest things that women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility, acne, facial hair, these are the ones that have a menstrual cycle that can last for 60 to 70 days. Actually, insulin is one of the things that actually will cause this. And I'm going to show you how insulin actually turns your testosterone, and for women, turned with polycystic ovarian syndrome, turns it into something that's 10 times more powerful than testosterone. Is called DHT. Also, what it would do is having high amounts of insulin will actually turn your testosterone into estrogen. So now you're going to have too much estrogen that will then actually compete with your thyroid to regulate your metabolism, and then will continue with this cycle of actually causing increased fat storage. So the more fat that you actually have, fat cells also produce estrogens as well, and then it becomes an actual a vicious circle. Now, insulin resistance is also tied to having high cholesterol and having high triglycerides. And the key to lowering your cholesterol has nothing to do with not having dietary cholesterol. The key to lowering cholesterol is actually lowering the insulin response. And the number one thing that's causing a high insulin response is actually number one, stress, and number two, it's actually eating too many processed sugars. So now you can see how insulin resistance literally can be one of the biggest things that contributes to cardiovascular disease, hormone issues, inability to lose weight, can't get your hunger under control, having migrating joint pain, and also having a severe fatigue. So insulin resistance. So you got to get your sugars and you got to get your stress under control. Now, how do you know if you have insulin resistance? They're not going to do it at the doctor, because all they measure is they measure your blood sugar. And if you're only measuring your blood sugar, the only time the blood sugar is going to matter is once you already have become type 2 diabetic, which means that you are so far into the ball game that it can be very hard to be able to get out of it. So this is actually a woman who has undiagnosed diabetes. She can't figure out why she can't lose weight, but she has tried this whole calories in, calories out, but she was eating just the same food. So she was eating poorly, but just trying to eat less of it. And she said, I can't figure out why I'm so hungry all the time. And I'm going to show you exactly why. So number one of the things that you do is, rather than measure blood sugar, you measure what's known as your insulin levels. So normally your insulin levels is that we would like them to be really low. Medically, they say under 21, but where we actually want to see them is at least under 9. So you can see hers that her insulin levels were at 60. So here's what happens. She needs a tremendous amount of insulin just to try to keep her blood sugars within a normal range. Now, on top of that, you can see that we measured this hormone that's known as leptin. Leptin is your hunger hormone. So as your insulin levels go up, so do your levels of leptin. And leptin is actually the hormone that when you're properly hearing it, it actually turns off this hunger mechanism. And you can see in hers that this was absolutely sky high, which means she can't hear leptin anymore, which means she was constantly hungry. And if you're constantly hungry, good luck trying to do the calories in, calories out method. You can see that her blood glucose levels were elevated. And in fact, this is actually at 108. Fasting is considered diabetic. But Just understand this is your glucose or blood sugar levels can fluctuate based off of stress, can fluctuate throughout the day. So this is one of the things that's going to be actually the least accurate because it fluctuates. Now, hemoglobin A1C is a 90-day average of your blood sugar. So basically what they do is they take your red blood cells and they see how much damage they have to them because sugar, high insulin, will damage the connective tissue within the body. This is why type 2 diabetics have so much joint pain. This is why type 2 diabetics have joint replacements. This is why type 2 diabetics have so much pain and stiffness inside of their body. And so you can see her hemoglobin A1C average blood sugar, you can see, or average, which is her 90-day blood sugar average, is at 6, and anything over 5.5 is actually considered diabetic. Now here's the thing. She has a problem losing weight, but the biggest thing that I'm concerned about isn't the fact of what she looks like, it's actually the function of the brain. See, is that when you look at Alzheimer's and when you look at dementia, there's also a connection between insulin resistance and brain function. This is why there's a very real term out there that's called diabetes brain, that people with type 2 diabetes suffer with forgetfulness, brain fog. They have symptoms of dementia because as those blood sugars are going up, it's shrinking the brain. So you can see that if someone has an A1C under 5.2, every year there's a little bit of brain shrinkage, but once that goes up to above 5.9, it almost doubles every single year. So if she doesn't get this under control, what is her future? Her future is medication, her future is stroke, her future is heart attack, her future is Alzheimer's, her future is loss of limbs, and the biggest thing she has to lose is actually her quality of life. And let me be clear, calories in and calories out did not cause this. Now let's talk about cortisol. This is a test that you can measure what's known as your cortisol rhythm, otherwise known as your circadian rhythm. So normally when you look at your circadian rhythm, you should fall in between these two numbers. So you wake up in the morning, you're going to have a little bit elevated cortisol. Your cortisol should be at its highest late morning to early afternoon, and then as it goes through, it should taper off to start to get lower and lower and lower and be at its lowest point at night. This is why you should have the easiest ability to be able to sleep. This is why people suffer with weight gain when they're working a night shift. Now, if you look at this woman, you can see that her cortisol levels are through the roof. So you can see actually how high they are, and this is a product of stress. And again, stress is going to wreck your blood sugar, and stress can lead to what's known as insulin resistance. So you've got to get your stress under control. But I want you to think about it. How do we make this worse? Or how do we exacerbate this? Well, we exacerbate it because when we're stressed, we typically will run to eating a bunch of carbs and sugar in order to make us feel better, and now that's considered a double whammy. So how do you deal with stress? Let's talk about something that doesn't cost you anything. Great stress reduction tool is known as the 5x5, and this is what I live by every single day. The 5x5 rule says this. Number one, don't dwell on something for more than 5 minutes. And number two, ask yourself this question, 5 years from now, will it really matter? And if I would have known this 10 years ago, it would have saved me a lot of stress. So someone says something bad about you, well, go ahead and be angry, but don't dwell on it for more than 5 minutes. And ask yourself this question, what I'm going through right now that I'm stressing over, will it really matter? Will it really matter if my house is clean? Will it really matter that so-and-so said this about me? Will it really matter 5 years from now? And that helps you to give you a different perspective. Now, for those of you who you can't live by that, and I understand, I get it, sometimes there are times where the stress can be a little bit out of control, is rather than turn to food and alcohol during times of stress, you can turn to herbs instead. So these are way safer than your drug of choice for stress, which is going to be either sugar, wheat, or maybe fermented corn or barley, otherwise known as beer and hard liquor. So things like kava, CBD oil, California poppy actually will help to lower the stress response in the brain. So even lowering the stress response in the brain can actually help you to lose weight because it helps to calm down the central nervous system. All right, so roadblock number 2 is you don't exercise, or if you do, you're doing the wrong type of exercise. See, when someone tries to develop some kind of weight loss plan, here's what they usually do. They go to the gym, they get their membership at Planet Fitness, and when they get there, they walk around for 30 minutes, maybe going on a couple of machines that actually do not serve any purpose for your everyday life. And then at the end, they may drink a lot of water, towel themselves off, and then do 20 minutes to 30 minutes of mild to moderate intensity exercise. Now, here's the thing. Chronic exercise also raises the stress hormone cortisol. And really, in comparison, your workouts should actually be very short, they should be intense, and they should be designed to make you functional, not necessarily skinny. See, the thing is that exercise, when it comes to its contribution to weight loss, does not contribute very much. Nutrition, by far and away, is actually what matters. So instead of worrying about exercise when it comes to weight loss, you should look at exercise as the prep work to help your hormones better, and it's also the prep work to make you more functional, better at everyday life, and it also should do another purpose I'm going to talk about in just a second. So here's what exercise really should be like. Number 1, exercise should be constantly varied. That means that every single day when you exercise, you're always doing something different and you're not doing things repetitively. I'll give you an example. Is that when we go to the gym, we go on the elliptical, we go on the Stairmaster, or we run. Those 3 things I hardly ever do. I never do the Stairmaster, I never do the elliptical, and I don't run that much. Because I'm going to tell you something, is that in my everyday life, I don't need to run that much. However, what we're doing is always doing different things and different movements so that we're always varying our movements. Now, one of the reasons why people hate to exercise is because they're bored with it. But if it's always constantly varied, you're never ever going to get bored with exercise, and that's going to help you follow through better. Number 2, your exercise has to be functional. Now, how much do you need to jog at a moderate pace to get through your everyday life? I'm going to say you never need to do it. And in fact, if a bear is chasing you, you better be a sprinter and not a jogger. Otherwise, the bear is going to have a very tasty lunch. So you should be focused on other things to help you with your everyday life. Now, how many times have people said, I don't squat. I got 2 bad knees. Here's the thing. You do squat every day. Do you get out of bed? Do you get out of the car? Do you get off of the toilet? Do you get out of a chair? Then you do, in fact, squat, and you need to become better at it. I don't like to pick up any kind of weights. I got a bad back. I don't like to pick stuff up off the floor, otherwise known as a deadlift. Let me tell you something. You do pick stuff off of the floor. Maybe it might be all of your kids' dirty laundry or your husband's towel. So you need to be able to squat, to press, to pick things up off the ground, because this makes you better in everyday life. No one wants to be skinny in a nursing home. You actually want to be able to do the things that you love, and exercise, if it's functional, affords you that ability. And the third thing is, as far as helping with insulin resistance, high intensity and short duration is always the best way to go. So it should be, your workouts really should only be 5 to 15 minutes, which is the best thing that you can do for helping that insulin response, and it's the best thing you can do in order to build muscle. So don't ever tell me you don't have time to work out, because we're only talking about 5 to 15 minutes. But here's the thing, so many people say, I want to lose weight, and you really don't want to lose weight. really what you want is you want to look better. And so one of the biggest benefits of doing this form of exercise is so that you can look great naked. You don't care what you weigh as long as you look great naked. So let me talk to you about the difference between men and women when it comes to exercise. Women and men are different. Women who are cycling, who have a 28-day hormonal cycle, you have to understand that because of your cycle, you really only have 2 weeks out of the month to be able to lose weight. And now you know why men and women lose weight at very different rates. So when we talk about exercise, one of the things that cycling women have to be very careful of is causing too much stress on your system, which can then affect your hormone function. Things like progesterone, things like your cortisol levels, that can then influence your estrogen levels and things like that. So typically, especially if a woman is having some kind of hormone issues especially, or they have a ton of mental stress that's going on, you have to be very careful with when and how you're exercising. So typically we say as a great rule of thumb, based off of what your hormones look like during your 28-day cycle, weeks 1 and 3 should be constantly varied functional movements, but you should perform them at a lighter intensity. And the reason why is you don't want to drain your hormones too much while you are actually menstruating. Okay? Now, weeks 3, the reason why as well is that this is where you need a buildup of hormones during this time. And so when you have this buildup of hormones, high amounts of stress and a high intensity exercise that is going to raise those cortisone levels will actually cause your hormones not to build what you need in order to create build up that endometrium, so that after day 28 you then can menstruate and be able to menstruate all of those out. Now weeks 2 and 4 though, those are the best times to do constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. And in fact, for those 2 weeks, you can absolutely go after it, but just weeks 1 and 3, you have to bump the intensity down. Now, exercise for men, constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity, and men, you could do this 4 weeks every month. So there is nothing that you have to avoid, because men, you don't have to, you don't menstruate, and men aren't as affected by stress when it comes to their hormones as much. So roadblocks 1 and 2. When we talk about the high amounts of insulin, when we talk about not exercising in the right way, how do you address that? Typically when we work with men, we may do some testing, obviously when it comes to other health issues, but if you're talking about weight loss and weight loss only, men typically only have roadblocks 1 and 2. And how we address that is what we cover in our T28 challenge, in which we teach you how to lower your insulin levels dramatically, and at the same time we're also teaching you how to do the right type of exercise so that you become more functional and that you also look better naked. Now, when you can get your insulin levels under control and you become more insulin sensitive, then the automatic consequence of that is you don't have the cravings anymore. This is hormonal physiology. A basic understanding of hormonal physiology is that if you lower your insulin, you're also going to lower those leptin levels and become more sensitive, so that you're not constantly craving those foods all the time. And this is where the T28, which is our 28-day challenge, does a fantastic job of actually addressing that. Now, ladies especially, you have 2 other roadblocks that you need to make sure that you are handling this as well. The third roadblock is actually inflammation and the immune system. Inflammation and the immune system. One of the things that we always talk about is, where are the sources of inflammation actually coming from? Well, you can have physical inflammation, you can have chemical inflammation, and then also mental inflammation, aka also known as stress. But where a lot of people start, they have no idea that this can be a roadblock, is actually the two biggest things that I'm going to talk to you about. Number one is weight loss and the spine. This sounds ridiculous, but I want you to bear with me. See, as profession, I'm a chiropractor. And I saw some really weird things that I didn't expect when I was early into practice, where we would have people who would come in who would have chronic pain like headaches or neck pain or back pain. They also would have a problem losing weight. And as we actually started to correct the inflammation that was happening in their spine and their nerve system, they would lose 15, 20 pounds in 6 to 8 weeks. And I thought, well, why on earth would that happen? So literally by correcting the spine and the nerve system, by correcting things like having disc damage, or having a forward head posture, or the granny posture, or having an inability to be able to flex and extend your spine, why would that actually be a roadblock to weight loss? And here's the reason why. There's two reasons. Number one, when you have problems in the spine, it puts you into chronic fight or flight. And remember, fight or flight is that stress response to get you away from the bear, and it can release an overabundance of cortisol that then makes you insulin resistant. Number two is that when you have actual physical pain going on inside of the body, it also puts you into fight or flight. It also causes this dominance of cortisol inside of the body. So once actually the spine starts to move the way they're supposed to, and you start to correct posture, you start healing discs inside the body, and you start lowering that cortisol response, and the body can start to relax. And when it's relaxed, weight loss becomes a lot easier. And let me give you an example. With what I do, seeing a lot of actually autoimmune patients and things like that, is that the doctors actually give them steroids. So they give them these steroids to try to knock out the immune system in order to lower the inflammatory response. What you actually see is you see that one of the side effects is that they develop type 2 diabetes, and they develop an unbelievable amount of weight gain. And they say that is a side effect of taking these steroids. So because basically they're almost exactly the same as cortisol inside of the body. Number two, let's talk about chemical inflammation. I meet people all the time, they say, Dr. Nate, I don't know why I can't lose weight because I eat clean. Listen, everybody says that they eat pretty clean. But let me ask you a question. Is kale healthy for you? And everybody says yes, and I say, it depends. What about lettuce? Is it healthy for you? Everyone says yes, and I say, it depends. What about almonds? It depends. What about tomatoes? It depends. What about tuna? It depends. What about beef protein? It depends. And here's why it depends. Is because even foods, if you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, they can be healthy for you, but they're not healthy for you if they're creating inflammation. So how do you know what clean eating is? Well, you test it in order to see the foods that are creating an inflammatory response to. I'm going to give you a perfect example. This is a gentleman who comes in over the last 20 years, has put on 80 pounds and can't figure out why it happens. He says, Dr. Nate, I work out an hour every single day. I ride my elliptical and I watch TV. That's the first thing that he was doing wrong. And so he would intermittently fast, and then he would eat food and he would get tremendous bloating, and he would gain 8 pounds after every meal. And so he would eat foods even if they were healthy, but that would actually create an inflammatory reaction. And if the body is always trying to deal with inflammation, it doesn't want to lose weight. It wants to handle the inflammation first. So if you look at an x-ray, this is his x-ray. Number one, when you look at the x-ray of the lower abdomen, normally you should see it all nice and gray. But when you look at his, this is his stomach. He's got tremendous bloating that's happening in his stomach, tremendous bloating in his colon, and bloating all over his small intestines. That's where you see all of these black things that are going on. So when we ran his food test, you can see that he responds to almonds, barley, beets, eggs, casein, which is the protein in milk, which is shrimp, tomatoes, wheat, baker's yeast, which is in bread, and brewer's yeast. So listen, if you are reacting to yeast, guess what? You are eating way too much sugar, and you cannot tell me that you aren't, because the test doesn't lie. So he looked at this and he said, oh my gosh, this is everything that I'm eating. Well, when we do a food test, what a food test actually shows is it shows how you're breaking down your foods, number one, but it also shows what's leaking through. So not only was this person not digesting his food the way he was supposed to, but number two, he had something that was known as leaky gut syndrome, in which the foods he was eating was leaking through the intestines, going into the immune system, the blood supply, and the immune system, every time he ate it, was creating an inflammatory reaction. So another lab that we ran, because this person was also had a low functioning thyroid, is we ran a thyroid test with his hormones. And lo and behold, after being on Synthroid for 30 years, he finally understood why he was so sick and why his metabolism was so absolutely tanked. And we did what was known as checking for autoantibodies against the thyroid. This is the number one cause by far of having a low functioning thyroid. Number two is actually can be estrogen dominance, and number three can actually just be a simple nutritional deficiency. So when you look at this, his levels, you can see of how high his autoantibodies were. In fact, this is 50 times higher than what they're supposed to be. And this other number was 5 times higher, 5 to 6 times higher than what they're supposed to be as well. So you can see that he's having an autoimmune reaction, tons of inflammation taking place. You can see that he's got terribly low testosterone. And then on top of that, you can see he's got a tremendous amount of iron in his liver. And what is the number one cause of excessive iron storage in the liver? Fatty liver. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Also having chronic low vitamin D. Do you guys know that in order for your body to burn fat, you need the vitamin D hormone to signal the body to be able to burn fat? And his was pitifully low. So is there a protocol for him? Not until he gets the right testing. Raise your hand if you're this person, if you know these people. You have the people who eat a large pizza with fries, Coke, and dessert, and they stay skinny. And then you have the people who literally think about chocolate or breathe around chocolate, and they gain 15 pounds. And I'm going to show you the reason why that's happening. So number 4 is estrogen dominance and having poor liver function. I'm going to help you connect the dots when it comes to this. Estrogen dominance and poor liver function. Now when you look at this, this is called your steroid hormone pathway. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to memorize it. But when you look at this, this shows how your hormones convert inside of your body. Now if you notice a couple of things, you see that first and foremost, one of the foundational things that you need is actually cholesterol. Well, Dr. Nate, my cholesterol has been sky high. And the doctor said I got to lower my cholesterol. Remember, the liver produces cholesterol based on need. It will produce it in response to elevated inflammation. It will also produce it in the presence of elevated stress so that it can make actually more stress hormones. There's no such thing as bad cholesterol. There's only appropriate cholesterol. You also think things like progesterone. You also see things like here, like we talked about, cortisol. And then you also see things like testosterone and how it converts into DHT and how it also converts in what's known as estradiol. Now, there is no such thing as estrogen. They're actually called estrogens, and you make many different types of estrogens. Some good, some not so good. So I want to show you something, is that when people talk about having low testosterone, It's not a problem with your organs unless you've had some kind of external injury to them. If you are suffering with having low testosterone, because when you think about low testosterone, what does testosterone do? Testosterone gives you very singular thought. Testosterone is what drives you. Having testosterone gives you energy. Testosterone helps you to burn fat and helps you to build muscle. But there's a lot of people, men and women, who are having a problem doing that. So they think, I need to take some external form of testosterone. And the problem is not with production, is that you might be producing it, but you're actually what's known as aromatizing it into either DHT or estradiol. Let me show you how this happens. So estrogen dominance. Testosterone is then converted into either estradiol or into DHT, dihydrotestosterone. Now watch, what I'm going to tell you next, your jaw is going to drop. Here's what happens. In the presence of having too much insulin, it takes this testosterone, converts it into DHT, which is way more potent than testosterone, or it converts it into estradiol. And if the preference is for DHT, this is where men will bald. This is where men will lose the hair on their legs. This is where a man's prostate will start to swell. This is where women will start to have more androgen type symptoms like facial hair, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Women can also start to lose hair as well. Or if the preference is to turn it into estradiol, what happens is that it will cause, because the purpose of estrogen is actually, if you think women with a lot of estrogen will put fat on in specific areas like the boobs and like the butt. So it will cause an increase in fat deposition. That increased fat deposition will then cause more of this aromatase enzyme, which will then convert your testosterone into estrogen, which then increases circulating estrogens, which then will decrease your muscle mass, increase in fat, increase obesity, increase enzyme activity, convert testosterone to estradiol, and it never, ever ends. So what do you think? How do you combat estrogen dominance? The first thing is that you need to lower your insulin. But that's only half of the story. See, when your body is done with the function of a specific hormone, there's something that needs to be done because you're always creating more and more hormones. So the body has to be able to eliminate these hormones once they have served their function. So here's a woman. How do you measure that? It's called a Dutch test. So on this Dutch test, dried urine total comprehensive hormone test, you can see with this woman that she's making a tremendous amount of estradiol. One of her problems is she has high stress, high insulin levels that's causing high estradiol. When you look at this, these are the pathways in which the liver can metabolize them. So see, you need to be able to get rid of them, and the organ that does that is the liver. So when you see it, how she's converting and removing those hormones, you can see that her methylation activity is very low, meaning her liver cannot get rid of those circulating estrogens, and they just keep building up and building up and building up inside of the body. When someone tells you that you do not need to detox, have they actually tested your liver in order to see how your body is actually detoxing? Because yes, your liver does detox. Yes, your kidneys do in fact detox, but also your skin and also your lungs, all of those are detox, and they will do it unless you have more toxins that are coming in that the liver can't keep up with, or you do not have the right nutrition in order to carry out detoxification. It's very simple. So watch. This is a liver issue. What causes problems with the liver? Fatty liver disease. Alcohol will do it, but also the overconsumption of fructose, like high fructose corn syrup, which is in nearly everything now. Let me tell you something. Why do I tell some people you need to avoid fruit? And everybody goes crazy as if you need fruit. Fruit is not essential for life. So if people have problems with the liver, why do we want to add any more burden to the liver? That's not a life sentence of not having any fruit. It's an intervention until we can see that the liver is actually recovered. Another thing that's going to cause problems with the liver, we're not even talking about toxicity, we're talking about nutritional toxins, things like hydrogenated oils, which have a 90-day half-life, and artificial sweeteners that the body has to process as well. Or you may have a liver problem if you have a nutritional deficiency. So remember, all detox is giving the body the constituents, the liver, the constituents it needs to be able to turn something into water soluble and to be able to eliminate it through the body. Now let me ask you something. Ladies, why do you think now that people without a gallbladder are so sick? Why do you think that ladies without a gallbladder have such a hard time losing weight? Because you have a very serious liver issue. So this is why when you go to someone who doesn't know how to test properly for someone who doesn't have a gallbladder, why you can do keto and get very sick, why you've tried everything and you do not get any kind of results, because you don't know how to handle it properly when you don't have a gallbladder. So just as a basic guideline, what do you eat? On a normal day, you eat real food in which you do not have an allergy. You need to start increasing good fat into your system. You need to have lean proteins, obviously, and have more collagen, because collagen is actually what makes up your skin, hair, nails, and your joints. You should have tons of veggies. And yes, they are carbs, but they're carbs that take a long time to break out, that do not spike your insulin levels. And maybe, depending on how you've been tested, maybe some fruit. Now, if you're going to be doing a workout day, add some more carbs, maybe a little bit more fruit after your workout. And here's the fifth and final roadblock, and I'm going to tell you, pay very attention, because this is the most important one. Because if you do not do this, the other four that I just showed you will not matter. And the fifth and final roadblock is this. You keep saying one day. One day I'll start. One day I'll get it in order. One day I'll get everything in place to be able to do it. One day I'll start working out. One day I'm going to change everything. One day I'm going to do it. But the problem is one day never happens. That one day is always one day off, and it never, ever happens. I'm going to tell you something. One of the reasons why I made such a radical shift and a radical transformation in my life was because I got tired of saying one day. I had chosen one day for years. For years. It was always my excuse. It always made me feel so much better that I intended to do something, but I never did it. And I'm going to tell you something. Disease doesn't care about what you plan on doing. It only cares about what you're doing today. So I had always said one day, one day, one day, but I said today when something happened in my life that I'll always remember. And that was someone very near and dear to me was diagnosed with cancer. See, what I saw happen is I saw him go through the process of having part of his colon removed. I've seen him go through the process of having a kidney removed. Life is hard having a colon removed, part of your colon removed. Life is hard having a kidney removed. And I came to this conclusion. It's always hard. It can be hard and you have your health, or it can be hard and you're sick. And the choice is yours. So every day, the reason why I choose hard is because I want to leave a legacy. I want to leave a legacy of helping people. I want to leave a legacy with my family. I want to leave a legacy that I know that I made a difference. And if I don't have my health, and if I'm sick, I'm suffering with no energy, and I'm miserable, that decreases my ability to make an impact on this earth. And you're no different. Your job is to leave a legacy. And you cannot leave a legacy if you're sick or if you're dead. You might be super excited right now and you're saying, what do I need to do? What kind of testing do I need to get? What's the game plan? What's the roadblock? And I always say this because many people are excited until I say this. If someone wishes for good health, one must first ask oneself if he's ready to do away with the reasons for his illness. Only then is it possible to help them. See, there's many people who want a better life. But my question is are you willing to act today? Are you willing then to get the proper testing? And are you willing, based off of your testing, to give up the things that made you sick in the first place? And if you know that you need to get tested, I'm going to tell you something, is that a normal visit in our office is $425. But if you're watching this right now and you're ready to act, that visit is $150 with or without insurance. What that first visit allows us to do is to review your past lab results. Number two, we have you fill out a functional assessment questionnaire. This is a bunch of questions and that helps us to see the organ systems that are under the most amount of stress. Number three, we'll be sitting down together for a consultation. We'll be performing an exam and we'll be doing needed x-rays. Why x-rays? Because we're going to be looking for physical stressors, number one, and number two, we're also going to be looking for chemical stressors as well that you can see when you look at an x-ray. So once I take your FAQ, I take your lab results, I take the x-rays, I take your history, and I take all of that together, then I sit down and I go over everything and I get to work. And on your next visit, I'll go over with you what's good, I'll go over with you what's not so good, and I'll go over with you, here's your first steps and what you need to do to make sure that you are accomplishing every health goal when you walked into the office. So I hope that makes sense, but you're gonna need to act. And you're gonna need to make sure that you're willing to give up the things that made you sick in the first place. So guys, I hope you understood and I hope you learned and I hope now you know how to apply proper testing so that you can start destroying the roadblocks that not only lead to weight loss resistance, but actually to lead to poor health, sickness, illness, and disease. Again, I'm Dr. Nathan Thompson with Exemplify Health Center. Be well, and I hope you had a great time. Thanks for joining us.